Hi everyone, so Diablo 4 has finally released their roadmap. This is something they have teased already some weeks ago in preparation of Season 8 when the PTR came around and so on. Maybe you've heard about it, but here it is. They finally published it and I gotta say, oof. This is kind of my impression when I saw this. Well, we have like the kind of like outline for the next few seasons. Well, in fact, there's also one past season, pretty much like the current one with the witchcraft season, which is basically over. We already know like all this stuff here, January to April. Then April to July, this is season 8, the upcoming season. We have played the PTR, so we already know what this is looking like. There are a bunch of nice updates in there, and we don't have the final patch notes, where I expect a lot of things are going to improve massively from what we have seen on the PTR. But overall, I guess it's a decent update to the game. And now come July to September, and then September to December, with like 2 more seasons later this year. So it seems like they keep going with their typical 3-month-ish cycles. Sometimes it's a bit more, sometimes a bit less. And well, here we are with the next season starting on 29th of April. So this will last until like end of July or something like that. Or like, yeah, sometime here they're gonna start season 9 basically, and then season 10. And in 2026, we're gonna get the new expansion. This was already announced as well. We did expect it, well, originally at least from this year. So this should be like 2025, because they said they will do annual expansions, which means once every year. And we didn't get one in 2025 yet. So turns out they are pushing that back a little bit. Maybe this means it's gonna be much bigger and there's gonna be a lot of stuff in there and they need more time to cook, which I think is fine. So this is just kind of what we got. But let's talk a little bit about what we can see here. Now, I did not really expect all that much from this roadmap, because most of the time they probably don't really have like the perfect idea of what they are trying to develop like 1 year in advance or something like that. So roadmaps are always to be taken with a bit of a grain of salt. On the other hand, it does give us a bit of an outlook of what we can expect for the next few seasons, which, I mean, frankly, is just not really all that much, at least from what it sounds like. Here they have kind of added a bunch of random points that don't really say anything on these like roadmap items. Like, okay, we're getting new powers, for example. So we have the witchcraft powers now. In season 8 we get the boss powers, and in season 9 we get the Horadric powers, and then in season 10 we get the chaos powers. So it seems like they kind of just keep going forward with the same boilerplate recipe of giving us some kind of like temporary power creep in those borrowed power season themes, with probably some kind of like interface similar to what we already know from witch powers, vampire powers, and so on. Maybe a slight tweak on that or something, and this is kind of like how it goes. Personally, I don't really mind borrowed power seasons. They are a pretty efficient way of kind of changing up the gameplay for all classes, for all builds all at once, and not just focusing on a few builds and updating those a little bit, and then everyone else who comes back to play the game plays exactly the same stuff again. It's nice to see a bit of like an extra tweak here. On the other hand, I feel like these like temporary solutions are just not really what the game needs all that much. Yeah, it's cool and fun to try something like this. On the other hand, I feel like there's still so much like room for improvement and so much of like a gap in terms of like missing content. Content needs further updating and tweaking, that I would really hope they would focus more on that. Maybe the expansion will bring some relief here, but overall I feel like there's too much focus on those seasonal themes and those seasonal powers, and too little on the overall game. Now, that being said, there is also some notes here about permanent updates from what it sounds like. So we have that here. Dungeon escalation, which sounds kind of interesting. So I'm not sure what exactly that will mean, but probably some kind of like maybe endless dungeon that becomes harder and harder or something like that. Or maybe there's like, some stuff you can do with like extra modifiers for, monsters and environment and whatever. So overall, the idea behind it does seem like it could be something cool, but we have no information about it. So for now, I'm a bit hesitant. But I do say here, for example, there's going to be new Nightmare Dungeon activities as a permanent addition, and I think this is really good. So this really gives me hope that they might actually introduce some kind of like system similar to the Atlas passage tree in Path of Exile, for example, where you can customize your dungeons a little bit. You can add extra content and you choose this over that, or you add extra rewards and you choose this over that, or you make it harder and juice it up, and then there's going to be like an Uber Butcher that is like 10 times harder, or this kind of stuff. Basically, I think this is really what Nightmare Dungeons need, and this should maybe become like our kind of like more main endgame type focus, where we actually farm the stuff that you want to farm in like a more coordinated manner, instanced, and it just has this like dungeon delving kind of feeling. So if they do some overall updates to Nightmare Dungeons, make them feel and flow better, and then add this kind of stuff as well, it could be really cool. So I hope that they're cooking here. I guess only time will tell. We're probably gonna see some updates about the Sins of the Horadrim season in sometime in June or something like that. So it'll be like 2 months or now or so when we're probably gonna hear about this. But yeah, this is something that I have also talked about with Brent Gibson directly, actually, when I was there last August or September for like the Spiritborn reveal. I visited them in NA, and I actually had like a talk with a lot of the devs, including the game director. And this is something that I just suggested to them as well. So I hope that they kind of like took that feedback and yeah, maybe gonna make something cool there. So while Season 8 does update like especially the boss stuff a little bit, and you know, there's like a more interesting kind of boss progression now, and this whole system is a bit better, it doesn't really change the overall game all that much, because bosses are like not really such a big part of the end game like loop. Basically, you do them for a little bit, and then most of the other time you do other stuff, farming your masterworking, farming the pit for XP, and so on. So bosses are just like not really such a big focus, I feel, and it doesn't really change the overall game. But I think that especially the Season 9 update here with the dungeon escalation thing and the Nightmare Dungeon and stuff, if that actually becomes like kind of like a new main endgame progression and a new main endgame kind of activity, then this would actually really add something cool and exciting to the mix. So I mean, my hopes are here for Season 9 pretty high up. Then we have Infernal Chaos September to December. This is Season 10. And here we're getting these Chaos powers, and then we get Infernal Hordes update. So that sounds kind of cool as well. Infernal Hordes has kind of just been like left in the dust ever since it was introduced in Season 5. It was kind of okay for a season or so, but it does get very repetitive and very boring very fast. Now I understand some people really like Infernal Hordes. I don't think it's that bad, but only in small quantities. And that makes me believe that they might update this as some kind of like longer term progression and like a bigger system, similar to what they might be doing with the Nightmare Dungeons here, for example, where Infernal Hordes becomes just kind of, you know, also one of the bigger endgame activities that we will do now. Maybe they're going to update the Banes and Boons to be a lot more like a roguelike and actually like really changing a run. Maybe they're actually going to, you know, start adding multiple levels to kind of like pass through as you go, and just maybe get some kind of like, you know, uber Infernal Horde mode that actually lasts like, you know, 2 hours or something like that. And it's some kind of like, you know, mega dungeon, and, you know, it kind of gets harder and harder, and eventually becomes something like, you know, Hades or something, where you choose, you know, one power up or something like that after every single room, and you kind of keep going. So this is like something I would hope to see at least. I think it could be a really cool game mode in Diablo 4. And let's hope that this is actually something that they're going to do here. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. Here it just says more to come for permanent editions, so I'm not sure if this would actually just be like a seasonal thing and it's going to be as big as I am dreaming right now, but at least, yeah, we can still have hope, I guess. And lastly, we have 2026, where they said nothing really besides there's a new expansion coming, but they now also confirmed the new ranking system and leaderboards and more stuff to come, I guess. There's going to be the seasons every 4 months and so on. We don't know when in 2026 the expansion is going to launch. I would expect it's going to be somewhat early on in the year and not so much late in the year. Number one, because we actually don't see much into like the next year. We just see up to until December. It does say 2025 roadmap, but I would expect in general that they're trying to like kind of keep the delay as short as possible for 2026 and the expansion, because they were supposed to already launch the expansion at least in December this year, which they're not doing. So maybe it's going to be a season after that, sometime in the early spring, or at the latest in summer or so is my expectation right now. And then we also have a ranking system and leaderboards. They have not really said anything about that. We used to have that in the form of the gauntlet, which was terribly received. People really didn't like that. I did play it for a little while. I even have my trophy here on the wall, actually. But yeah, it was just not really the thing that the game needed, I guess. And a lot of people probably felt the same way. There were very few people that took this seriously, and it was pretty awful. A lot of people are asking for stuff like pit leaderboards, for example, and I do agree this would be a relatively good addition. However, if they just introduce leaderboards in the current state of the game, with the current state of the pit, I think this would be a disaster as well. Not many people would care about this, including myself. That is kind of saying something, considering that I've basically built my entire streaming career on Diablo 3 solo greater with pushing for rank 1s. It's just that Diablo 4 doesn't really hold a candle when it comes to pushing. The pit is just not the same as Greater Rifts. It's just not that fun. You can't really express your expertise and your knowledge and your gameplay skills so much in Diablo 4 as you can in Diablo 3. The runs are just kind of bland and boring. There's too little strategy and just too little kind of like excitement when it comes to pushing. And if you compare this to Diablo 3, where recently I've played the Season 33 update, for example, and I had such a blast again going in, pushing rank 1s, getting those rank 1 pop-ups and, kind of feeling accomplished after such a achievement. It was really fun, and you just can't get this kind of feeling in Diablo 4 right now. So I hope that if they do something like that, which I think they should, they also rework the pit to be a lot better in terms of like excitement, in terms of like just the pushing experience, which is just relatively awful. There are many reasons for that. I can go into them in a lot of detail. In fact, I think I have in some of my feedback videos and stuff like that. Probably talked about this at length. So it's just not the same, is basically what I'm saying. On top of that though, I do hope that we're also getting more leaderboard systems that are not just so focused on like the very high end of like the absolute giga blasters or something like that, but something where more people can participate, even if they don't really like, get something out of it, or they don't really have a chance to be like number 1 or so, but just kind of like as a community thing, I guess, to, see where you are, see what you can do and like a certain challenge. And it could be a lot more stuff than just the pit. They could make kind of like, leaderboards for leveling up. They could make leaderboards for, farming the most amount of legendaries in 1 hour. They could make the leaderboard for the most whispers completed in 1 hour. I don't know. There's like tons of ideas. There's so much stuff in Diablo 4. And I really hope they're gonna use this opportunity here to actually make some really wacky stuff as well, where people can just kind of go in and just try their best, basically, and maybe even get like a little reward for the season, maybe get some kind of, in-game crafting mods or whatever, just as kind of like a reward for participating and, reaching like maybe a certain milestone or something like that. I think that stuff could be cool. So looking at this ranking system and the leaderboards here, I do have my hopes up quite a lot. On the other hand, it is far away, so we'll see what will happen. It does mean maybe that they will be cooking. Again, I generally have high hopes because it seems like when given enough time and enough polish and enough iteration, Blizzard usually comes out with something pretty decent. We've seen this with some of the other updates in the past when they made Loot 2.0. It does have its issues with tempering and masterworking that people are being upset about, and I think there should be some changes there in the future. But it looks like overall, whenever they rework a system, or they kind of like, for example, they took the gauntlet out and the leaderboards, and now they're like, thinking about the problems and then coming back with something better after a long time, I expect that it will be a lot improved at least. But yeah, maybe I'm just on copium here. We'll see what will happen in the end. I am, let's say, cautiously optimistic here with the at least Season 9 and Season 10 updates. For Season 8, I guess the ship has kind of sailed, so either you like it or you don't. For me, it does look kind of alright. I will play it a bit, and we'll see. No Rest of the Wicked is coming out, for example. I might be blasting that a bunch. This is like just 1 day later after the season. So maybe I'll play the season a bit and then No Rest, and then maybe I go back to D4 or to PoE or Last Epoch even, which is also looking incredible, to be honest. And there's going to be a lot of stuff in the next months to play anyway for ARPG blasters. So I'm not really worried about that, even if I don't like Season 8 much. Season 9 could be cool with the new Night Management stuff, so I definitely have my money on that. And for the others, yeah, we'll see what happens, I guess. So expansion, we just don't really know anything. Leaderboards, it could be really good, it could be really bad. A lot of people don't really care, so we'll see what happens. This is what we had here from the roadmap. Here are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you think that I'm completely off here, or what to expect basically, or if you have any other wishes or hopes. I am also in touch with the developers, so I can also talk to them and give feedback and so on. But for now, I do have to say, yeah, this roadmap, it does not seem crazy exciting. I didn't really expect much, and this is exactly what I got pretty much. So we got like, some new season teasers, and maybe this could be something good here, but on the other hand, I do expect that most of the big additions are going to come in expansions, since they're wanting to sell many expansions. I don't know how many, but I expect you're probably going to get at least 3, 4, 5 expansions for this game or something in the long run. And this means that they just don't really have much opportunity to introduce a lot of big permanent additions throughout the seasons. So until the expansion, at least, we're probably gonna see another like handful of seasons or so of relatively the same game with some updates, and this is about it. But yeah, this is what I got here. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys next time.